For more, let's speak to James Elder, spokesperson with UNICEF, standing by on the line in Geneva. Hello to you, James. 1 week on, and it doesn't seem like the situation's getting any better. We just saw the report with the harrowing images out of Gaza. What's the latest on the humanitarian situation in the Strip?
Absolutely nightmarish, unfortunately. I think your correspondent painted the perfect picture that you've now seen. 500 children, just over 500 Palestinian children have been killed in just these days since the attacks started. It's this perpetual call from the United Nations, from the Secretary General to aid organisations like UNICEF for a cessation, for something resembling humanitarian corridors, just so we can get supplies in and people can get out, but not moving from one part to the other. As we just heard, I mean, again, UNICEF reiterates this idea from the Secretary General to rescind the order for 1 million people to move. You've got hospitals overflowing. You've got children who can't access medical care, children who have injuries of war. You've got people who have lost all access to water. They are drinking what they know is contaminated water. And you've got bombardments ongoing. It's nightmarish, but it's real, and it's happening to hundreds of thousands of children whilst we speak.
And the concern is not just for the able-bodied people, but the children, but the elderly, those who are on life support under this total blockade, concerns about whether they could even move down the street, much less flee to southern Gaza.
Well, exactly, and they can't is the short answer. If you have someone in ICU and you have a lack of beds, you're asking doctors to make a decision in terms of who lives and who doesn't in trying to move people. Equally, as a colleague from the World Health Organization said, to try and move those people who have terrible wounds of war is a death sentence. And these are wounds of war. I've seen what shrapnel does when buildings collapse or when shrapnel from bombs and mortars goes through. It's designed to rip through concrete. It's unspeakable to say what it does to a child's body, and yet that's what's happening. That's why we see the fear and the tears. So again, there's this plea to Israel, but also to any country that has, powerful countries that have leverage, for a cessation for a moment of just of peace in Gaza, to stop the attacks, to open up humanitarian corridors. A lasting solution is the only thing that's going to happen here. It's going to be a political solution. So let's not see dozens or hundreds more Palestinian children killed. And in the same breath, let's get those Israeli children who are most likely in Gaza, who were taken hostage, let's get them back to their families, to their loved ones in Israel. That's a very clear call on Hamas to do that.
Yeah, and a very important call for peace. But James, I mean, we heard from Israeli authorities saying now is a time for war. Are organizations like yours, do they have contingency plans if peace is not imminent?
Look, unfortunately, UNICEF, right now we are dealing with wars in Ukraine, in Sudan, at least intense conflict in Sudan. This is what we do. It's frontline work. And we have very, very brave colleagues in Gaza. The challenge is that we need to constantly replenish supplies. So medical supplies are fundamental, making sure children have clean water, power to hospitals, which requires fuel, which is something UNICEF does. If we're unable to replenish those supplies, and we, like many others, are unable to do that because of this blockade, that becomes very difficult no matter how the next days pan out. But yes, of course, if we do see what is being threatened, then we will have a humanitarian catastrophe for the civilians in Gaza.
We've seen a flurry of diplomatic activity in the past 24 hours, more meetings today as well as this weekend. Any of these world leaders, any of these governments, do you think they're putting the humanitarian situation with as much importance that it deserves and trying to establish humanitarian corridors possibly?
Oh, I certainly know from my own organisation, from the Secretary General of the United Nations, who's been clear from the earliest outset and be using all influence from his office to try and affect some change within those governments, to put the right pressure on, to allow corridors, to allow supplies. But we're having this discussion, you and I UNICEF was making this call on Saturday. So we hope behind those closed doors, and I know the Security Council will meet again later, we hope that those decisions are being made, because otherwise we can see, my colleagues on the ground can see what happens, particularly what happens to children when those decisions are not made.
James, real quickly, so much of the focus on Gaza now, the rest of the attention, of course, in Israel. What about the occupied West Bank?
Well, indeed. I mean, I think what this relates to, whether it's the occupied West Bank or whether I listened to your news story early on and heard of the horrendous stabbing of one or two people, and who knows what the links to all these things are, but it does seem like incendiary language is not helping anyone right now. So across the region, elsewhere, we need everyone to take a step back from the brink, most critically because hundreds of thousands of children are on the brink in Gaza.
James, thank you very much for your time. James Elder speaking to us from Geneva.